Lama meba lada menam je tenpa sanje chumden den bejo. Shaja toba la cha ze lo chudo jabzo che. Kanze kanye zowo che tamze sajen den na kumban debro. Manen je den den na cho che suwa de ze keba jo la cha ze. Namda kunga cho do susan wa yi shi jabzo senje rambo. Chaban je den sumna la meba gombo chonye jo la cha ze. Senshon tenpa chimen da weshi sendon rawa jo la cha ze. Di reche ra sepa suma shi nyame chen shen shon la cha ze lu gombo tu chi che den. Tamche cheme tenpa bo soname yun den ja zu shi. Di shen shen la cha ze lu taben de sha che wa jo ge we ge su de tu. Che de tenam sho jo wa shen jo cha la cha ze lu chen de zhe we ma yin. La ba da la ra bu ne shen ge dang ba yin den de gen de ma ya cha. De wa jin ya me ja shen ge wa pu so so ba che rang ge sim de yu. Tian de san je den ba yin karma ra re ma me ju ma se ba che ru. Me lam lo da jen da ba ru de she shan nam de de da so nam de ye tum je se ba. Ko ban tom ne jen jen da de de ga da 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 chi we lam ju. Se be so len ro wan jo wa re sho.
To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, the full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the shadow of night, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one gone beyond, full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the teacher, the blessed one, the one full destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the completely and fully awakened one, the blessed one, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When the supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides, then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then, I prostrate. With the pure bodies formed supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 words. We know the best, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. You are immaculate, the 3 words are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity which makes one free from attachment, the virtue which frees one from the horribles, the one path, sublime pure reality, to the Dharma which pacifies, I prostrate. Those who liberate the most show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions. Perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or oil, a gleam, a flash of lightning, a cloud. See conditioned things as such. Through these merits may sentient beings attain vertical goals, subdue the flow of faults, and be delivered from emotional suffering, engage in sickness and death.
Sanje chono soje chono la chanchu pado dane jansu nagin jansu jibe sonam je rola penje sanje sanje chono soje chono la chanchu pado dane jansu nagin jansu jibe sonam je rola penje sanje sanje chono soje chono la chanchu pado dane jansu nagin jansu jibe sonam je rola penje sanje sanje chono soje chono la chanchu pado Nagin Jesu Jibe Sonam Jie Rola Penche Sanjen Rubarisho.
I go for refuge until I know the truth of the Buddha, the Lama, and the Sangha. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and without perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha, with the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I know the truth of the Buddha, the Lama, and the Sangha. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and without perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha, with the benefit of all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I know nothing, so the Buddha, the Lama, and the Sangha. Through the merit I created by practicing giving and the perfections, may I quickly attain the state of Buddha, with the benefit of all sentient beings.
Gede Pumba Dayana, Jadan Jibachino, Gede Pumba Namnesha, Pumba Senior Beverage. Danya Yuba Mayana, Dagi Yuba Kana, Dada Dagi Shibichi, Nanziman Zime, Nanziman Zimeka, Tian Yuba Mayende, Nanziman Zime, Kanga Torment. Nada Chiran Yadana, Dada Daganium Zena, Yavan Magashi, the Zebin said. Let on your Mose, Ratara, let on your Mondonia, Tata Junior, Tomani. Nago Shejan, Dajujan, Dame Shejan, Dembaju, Sanjan of Jatan, Dameka Shejan. Jabra Chawan, the Simju, the Majapa, Chunin, the Sung, Tamje Yanda, 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 Mayin, Yanda, Mimi, Yanda, and the Sanjay. Shene Shime Shiva, no, Joban of Jama, Joba, Namdo, Tene, Senior. Kala Dene Kanjuma, Tene Reshit, Yeme, Tele Shamba, Tishi Chemen, Sanjay Jedem, Ganam, Temba to Zinju, Chunjima, Tademe, Shabamania, Johnson, Sanja, Niendenum, the seven, Ransanji, Shin, the Temba Mela, Dadan Shua, Shesha, Joje, Kangi, to the Yazona, the Japan, the Prince, Quadam Tela, Charles. So, chapter 9. So I think this whole, the Chandrakirti's, the root stanzas, saying the gaining the mastery of ways of profound and vast. Gaining the gaining the mastery of ways profound and vast. Such person will gradually attain the ground of the perfect joy. So all, all those who thus aspire, pray and listen to this path. So then, editing with Buddha's sutra, and saying in the Buddha, the praising the quality of the understanding of the dependent originations. So if you listen this or understand, even not complete understanding, with ambiguity, the listening and intellectually kind of the understand some of the dependent originations, so may bring the crack on your samsara. So it's like so what really cuts the samsara, what can be through what path we can destroy the second existence is the realization of the dependent originations. So having said that, from the beginnings, in Chandrakirti saying, first he prays to the compassion, because the compassion is the seed of the enlightenment, right? So compassion, the seed is enlightenment. Now, as a fertilizer to giving rise to the sprout of the Bodhisattva, buddhahood. So the conditions are here: wisdom realizing emptiness and the enlightened mind of the Bodhisattva. These two as a fertilizer, and the seed you have is compassion, and as a result, is the buddhahood, right? So buddhahood. Now, when we talk about the compassions, the Chandrakirti only mentioned the compassion. Compassion, a sense of concern of the suffering of other, suffering and the cause of the suffering of other sentient beings. And this compassion, sense of concern for the other is through, the contemplating or reflecting on the 12 links of the dependent originations, not because of someone else's headache and pain, right? Rather, it's the reflecting upon, due to the ignorance, there's the karma, and from the karma, there's the consciousness that carries all the seed of the karmic seeds, and the consciousness joined to the next life, new element, and there's a name and form, and then after the name and form, there's the faculties developing, and through the faculties, there is the contact to the five sensory object through the faculties. And once you have the contact with the five sensory object, and there is the feeling, right, the sensations. So kind of pain, suffering, and neutrals. And then when there is some kind of feeling that really generates the craving for the feeling itself, and the craving for the conditions that feeds that feeling, right? So that's called craving and grasping. The craving is more to the feeling itself. The grasping is the the craving for the condition of the food or the taste or the sound or the smell, things that really feeds the feeling. And then that's craving and the grasping again, further developing the karmic seed that you have already planted within the consciousness. Now that manifests. So you can see that this is called the process of becoming. In the Wheel of Life, it's kind of depicted as a pregnant woman. Now is ready to give rise, new birth, process of becoming. After the process of becoming and the birth, and the very moment you're born, and so that very moment start disintegrating. Right? So disintegrating. So the aging and the death. So birth, aging, and the death. And sometimes you reflect reversed by contemplating on the aging, illness, and then the birth itself. And so these are all derived from the birth. And the birth comes from the process of becoming. Process of becoming coming from the grasping. Grasping coming from the craving. Craving is from the feeling. Feeling from the contact. And contact from the faculty. Faculty from the name and form. Name and form from the consciousness that carries the karmic seeds. And the consciousness of the karmic seed because of the actions, karma itself. And then the karma that is caused by or generated by the ignorance, right? So reflecting reversely and kind of forwardly, and many times, and you can sense the the suffering of other sentient beings. Everyone, every single sentient beings is under the cycles. So then there's some kind of sense of care or sense of concern for the others. So that is called the compassion here. So it's a little bit different from the empathy or the sympathy, right? So then that compassion's the further developing through the understanding of the emptiness. So the emptiness here is empty of independent nature, empty of intrinsic nature, empty of inherent nature, empty of self-sufficient, right? Which means every phenomena that exists not self-sufficiently exist, which means again not self-sufficient means anything that arises and then depending upon something else without existing of something else, nothing really can be arises or the manifest or identify as an entity, right? And so that's either not self-sufficiently existing, right? And the self or person is not self-sufficient exist, and the self phenomena, the table itself, house itself, the person itself, male, female, anything that exists, it's always relatively. Right? There's no such thing that exists in and of itself. And therefore, because of the things do not exist in and of itself, so any entity you just pick, any entity that you pick, so that entity never really exists by its own essence, or it is never findable, right, within the basis of that. Like for example, me or I exists by depending upon the combination of the five aggregates: the body, feeling, discrimination, awareness, and then the mental factors, and then the perceptions all together, right? And then you can say there is the person, and then some other factors, and you can say, oh, that this person is male, this person is female, and then his educations, or this person is, a professor, this person is engineers, and then by depending on this, every time there's new things, the characteristics that develop, and then that self is continuously changing. So which means that self or I is not really intrinsic, right? So because it is not intrinsic, so therefore the self or person is not there within the body, not there within the feeling, not there within the faculties, not there within the eye conscious, nose conscious, tongue consciousness, and it's also totally absent in the color, smell, taste, the tactilities. So unfindable within the basis. So that means not in here within the basis. So self or I is not inherently exist because it's not in here with the basis. So that kind of, then now this emptying the intrinsic nature is not really annihilating the existing of the self or I, right? So the self or I that exists kind of through the construct, it's a conceptually construct. Like for example, when you see many trees together and you have construct a forest as a singular, right? So it is not really due to the physical things. It is because of the conceptual has created the single entity, defined as a single entity, and giving the name of a singularity, a forest. So in a similar way, here, this human body and these human feelings
and you say, oh, I am human being, right? So this kind of, it only exists when things exist. Things exist in the concept. Things exist through the conceptualizations, right? So that is called dependent arisings. Dependent, pratitha samutpat in Sanskrit, pratitha samutpat. So which has translated in English, pratitha samutpat, something happened. In English translation it says, something happened to exist by depending on and something else that already exists, right? So it's still kind of arguable as something already exists. What do you mean by something already exists? That already existing is also existing depending on that thing, like favorable or unfavorable. So the very entity of unfavorable is existing by depending on the concept of unfavorable, right? The very unfavorable exists due to the favorable. So right. So it's kind of so nothing really holds its own identity. You have to impose the kind of the identity on the phenomena. So that's how the things really exist. So that is the understanding of the emptiness, understanding of the dependent arising, and that further kind of improve or the perfecting the compassion. So that wisdom is perfecting the compassion, and with that wisdom, you also find the perfecting the generosity, practice of the generosity, because it emptied the self-sufficient existing of the giver, and act of giving and what you give are all kind of mutually dependent, right? There is no self-giver that exists independently. So because of the action, there's the agent, the giver happen to exist. So the agent, actions, and the object. So so it helps to perfecting the generosity. So I think help means another word, the helping generosity means sometime and ordinarily and in the practice of generosity, there's always chances to developing negative emotions, even during positive things, right? Through the generosity, you can look down on others. Through the generosity, you can crave for something, fame or name, or kind of something. The good result may happen in next life, right? So there are many possible of developing the negative emotions. So through the wisdom realizing emptiness, it prevents all negative emotions, because it's proving that there is no giver that exists by itself. There is no act of giving that exists by itself. There is no thing that you are giving that exists by itself. So in the similar way, it's also perfecting the patience, right, and the concentrations and the moralities. So now we have said the seed is the compassions, and the wisdom realizing emptiness that purifies the every positive activities, right? The purifies means it prevents all the negative emotions along with this kind of practice of the compassion and the generosity and the morality and patience. So and then here now the Mahayana path is saying that so six perfections start to kind of six perfection can be go beyond, or it can increase when you have the greater intentions. So altruistic intentions, which means everything that you do, you have a goal. That goal is for, for the sake of all sentient beings, I wanted to be a Buddha. Right? For the sake of all sentient beings. So almost like sometimes Bodhisattva is a very, sometimes solemnness is the wise, selfish person right here. So because everything they want to improve, they gather the knowledge, any positive activities, and they always find the reason. This is for all sentient beings, for me to collect, to me to cultivate the merit, knowledge, everything, right? So I think that is the kind of, called bodhicitta. Bodhi is enlightenment, chit is the consciousness, enlightened mind, right? Enlightened mind, because it combined with two things. Because you say, sake of all sentient beings, may I become the Buddhas. So you are kind of aiming to go, and without forgetting the cause of the enlightenment. Because you said, for the sake of others, I'm going to be attain the Buddhas, right? So I think this really become the more powerful cause to drive these six perfections to go further. Because if you just live in the compassions, maybe it's like, oh, I wish, right? I have a good wish for every sentient beings. I like them to be happy, right? So you can also say, I like you to be happy, but I have no willing to help you. So the bodhicitta means now I'm the one who leads sentient beings, right? So I think that's how, gati, paragati, parasamgati, bodhi, suvahas, right? Go beyond. So this is all possible because of this bodhicitta, this powerful, the intention of the motivation, right? So, so then what is the first gati is here. So we call Tsoglam, the path of accumulations. We are accumulating the wisdoms and then the compassions and generating the bodhicittas. So cultivating the wisdom and the merit. So the first path of accumulations. And then after the path of accumulations, path of preparations. Now the preparation means now preparing yourself to be directly battled with ignorance, right? So, which means trying to prepare to generate the direct realization emptiness, right? So, so the warriors that before they go to battle, they put up all the armor, so right, like that. So it's just getting ready to fight. So, so part of preparations is have already gained come abiding special insight, and through through the come abiding special insight, and they're continuously meditating using the wisdom realizing emptiness, right? And that is the path of preparations. And right after the path of preparations, and then the first ground, first bhumi, so the great joy or the perfect joy. So then you reach the Bodhisattva's noble path. So this is called path of seeing. So before intellectually kind of seeing or kind of the meaning of the emptiness or dependent organizations, now you are directly, right? And realizing the emptiness of the self of person, emptiness self of phenomena. So this, according to the Mahayana path, so this first ground we call perfect joy. And perfect joy means why it's saying joy, right? Why in the perfect peace? Why it's not perfect knowledge? So perfect joy means, so this particular ground has a specially kind of uniquely perfecting the generosity, right? So that's why the perfect joy. And this joy comes from eliminating the self-cherishing, right? So that's a perfect joy. So the then the second ground comes, the second ground or second bhumi, so stainless. So this the Bodhisattvas who kind of who gained the second ground, the stainless, because of they have I think uniquely perfecting the morality, right? Stainless. So here the morality is now like ordinary people, the morality, the ethic is kind of they embarrass, right? The morality, or you just kind of accept this discipline, some kind of out of obligations, right? So, and then because if they find another way, they are ready to give up. So, right? So this discipline, the morality, is not become the nature of your mind, right? It's just out of obligation. You're just holding, and some, like religiously, sometimes accepting the morality out of fear. If I don't follow this, I may go lower on, right? So I may, next life, I may be born disabled or something like that. So there's some kind of obligations to follow on it. So the second kind of ground, the stainless, is the morality is not the kind of like it's not out of obligations. It's their nature of the mind. It's just nature, right? Like like nature of the water is the moistures, and the nature of the fire is the burning things. So like this, so this is is their natures. It's not out of promise or just some kind of they don't see the morality as something separate. It's not like a clothing you just get rid of and you just wear it. So the stainless means like that. So so what is the third name ground? Was luminous, right? And then they're similar, the two names, luminous and radiance, yeah. So luminous is the third ground. So again, this the unique the quality in third ground, patience, perfecting the patience. I think this whole possible through the wisdom, because of the wisdom. Perfecting generosity is because of the wisdom. Perfecting the morality is also kind of driven by this wisdom. And then even the third, the luminosity, is due to the perfecting the patient through the wisdom. Because there's a many kind of, there's, if you divide it in the impatient in the three, impatient with regard to the everyday kind of, routine, the discomfort things, right? Everyday, like heat or cold, right? Scratching, so headaches. So these normal everyday is happenings. So there's the impatient with that. And then another impatient is when you do something for others, you are doing kind of, working hard for others, or you are trying to help others, or you are working under the someone. So then there is kind of, so there's some kind of impatience because you are not ready to offer yourself to the others. You find it is too much to kind of, this kind of, taking the suffering for others. So this is one of the impatience. And the most kind of, the profound, the sort of the impatience is the knowledge. Out of ignorance, if you try to understand something, you're trying to figure out something, you're trying to reveal something, and that there's a difficulty to understand, right? So, so the first impatient has to learn through kind of, understanding the nature of the phenomena, and you may be able to disregard the suffering, right? When you are able to disregard the suffering, the everyday kind of heat, cold things, and that by understanding the reality, right? And then the second impatience is you can disregard, or you can overcome the impatience through accepting the suffering that, right, for the others. And this second patience comes through the developing the compassion, sense of love and compassion. And here the love and compassion, and you see, and Shantideva says, every time you feel comfort, pleasures, and pleasant, these are all result of benefiting others. Every time there's a unpleasant disturbance, kind of, turbulence, and so these are all the result of harming others. So that you want happy, right? Happiness, or the kind of, the peaceful or the pleasant experience is coming from sense of kind of developing compassion, sense of love for the others. So this is the right way or right path to make yourself more comfortable, right? So when there is a suffering that you experience by serving others, and you should accept that suffering. So, and then so this is the third impatience to overcome is through the understanding of the dependent originations. So nothing really intrinsically exists. So this the final kind of, how to say, the cause of the patience, the most I don't know, kind of, most powerful cause of the patience, right? The main cause of the patience is the revealing the nature of the reality. So this third ground, the Bodhisattvas has perfected the wisdom, perfecting the wisdom, continuously perfecting the wisdom. So that helps this third ground have a perfecting the patient. So then the virtuous and the fourth ground, radiance. So the fourth ground, radiance means it's like this particular Bodhisattva seems to be very magnificent. Kind of looks, looks very blessing because of the joyous effort, perfecting the joyous effort, diligence, perfecting the diligence. So they never kind of, without any hesitations, they never have any laziness due to self-cherishing, self-benefiting. So every moment, every single time, right, every activity of them is perfectly dedicated for the sentient beings. So therefore, they are more magnificent and more radiant. Yeah, Jimba Tsudru, Soba Tsudru. So diligence, perfecting the diligence of the joyous effort. So then the fifth ground is called hard to conquer. So that also, due to the wisdom. Hard to conquer means, like for example, like ordinary peoples, the kind of, the public is easy to conquer. So one person just go on the stage and say something, and many people say, yes, he's right. So they just and yeah, so that's why it's easy to conquer, right? So it's easy to manipulate their mind, their brain, right? So the fifth ground is saying that not only human beings, not only any kind of masters, the great scholars, even the kind of, the Bhagavan, the Shiva, and the Vishnus, they're very powerful, right? So even they try to kind of deceive that person through the disguise, right? So it is impossible the fifth ground can be kind of just slightly deceived or manipulated. So they hard to conquer. Sometimes the Bodhisattvas, when they are on the path, they're trying to practice, they're seriously follow, and sometimes there's out of kind of some obstacles, some god or the worldly god may deceive them. And I also told the story before. During the right after Buddha passed away, there's the great arhat named Nabuba, Dajjal Nabubas. But Nabuba means the black arhat. So he's kind of strong and look kind of his dark skin. So this arhat is kind of giving the teachings, and he helps the countless kind of sentient beings to attain the arhat, nirvana. So then there's a Mara, so he disguised in the entertainer. So around the monastery, and he set up the tent, and there are a lot of musics, and everybody goes to there. So Naguba, one day he said, maybe I should go there too. And he went there, and he said, so you did a good job. I want to offer you the flower garland garland of the flower. He put that garland on him, and then the real face appears. So there's this is the some of the powerful spirit, and sometimes they get jealous, so they can sometimes cause the hindrance, right? So it's like that. So the point here, and what I'm saying is why the fifth grounds are hard to conquer. So that there is no chances for any other worldly spirit or any intelligent person can kind of influence him. So I think that because of the wisdom, right? So hard to conquer. Tsongkapha. So then the sixth ground, now we are on the sixth ground.
Sixth ground, or are we on chapter 9?
Yeah, chapter 9 and then ground 6.
Oh.
Ground 6. So manifest, or what it says, the name manifest, right? Manifest. So mundu chuvas. So here the sixth ground manifest means now the Bodhisattva was on the sixth ground has started to kind of experiencing like similar quality of the Buddha. So the quality of the Buddha start to manifesting. So so this sixth ground, especially perfecting the wisdom. So, and in particular, the wisdom here and the stanzas, they're saying, urging those who are suitable vessel to listen. So they're saying this has the great beneficials. You should be, you should have interest in studying and learning and contemplating and the dependent originations. So in its stanzas, it says, gaining the mastery of the ways to profound and vast means now to gain the master in the method and the wisdom. Right? Such person will gradually attain the ground of the perfect joy. So this is the way to gain the attain the perfect joy by through the gaining the mastery of the wisdom and the method. So the wisdom and the method, wisdom side, like among the 6 perfections, the wisdom, perfection of the wisdom, and the rest of the methods, right? The vast side, generosity, morality, patience, and joyous effort or diligence, and then the concentrations are in the category of the vast, and the wisdom is in the one, the profound, right? Yeah. So it's saying that those who thus aspire, pray, listen to this path. And Nagarjuna also mentions saying that if I spend whole my life in analyzing and contemplating on dependent originations, so I should do that. Right? Even there's a whole life to study, right? So only the kind of, when there's when you understand the dependent originations more and the kind of deeper meaning, and that automatically helps you to maybe you should say that may facilitate the practice of the generosity, practice of compassion, and then the moralities, and all of them. It looks like, why? Because you see, every stingy, jealousy, anger, attachments, all rooted into the grasping self. Because of as long as this is the root of the ignorance is there, this negative emotions, it continuously grow and generating. So the opposite side is that when you apply the perfect antidote for the root of the ignorance, right? And then that makes much easier to practice generosity, love, compassion, and everything, right? If you cut the root of the tree, then you don't have to clean up the leaves and the broken kind of branches. So yeah, so I think that's the main thing is dependent. I think dependent arising is now the dependent arising. Is some may interpret the dependent arising. Oh, depending is like when the old men stand up by relying on a cane, or if you want to keep something like fragile things to keep safe, and then you may need some kind of base for that. So that is dependent. And here the dependent origination is not like that. Dependent originations is not two substantial phenomena depending each other. This is like dependent arising is like reflection of the face in the mirror, right? The existing of the reflections is depending on the mirror and the face and the space. But the reflections is not part of the mirror. It is not there inside the mirror. It is also not coming from somewhere else, not going to somewhere else. There's nothing enters into in the mirror, but there is the appearance. So the phenomenon dependent rising is like that. Is you cannot things are not locatable within the basis, but you cannot deny or kind of deny the existing of it, because there is the kind of the obvious the manifestation of the reflections, right? So that you cannot say it does not exist because I don't see where it's coming from. Or you say, oh, the reflection face, I don't accept it exists. There's nothing interest into it. Right? But there is existing. So the dependent arising is not like, the man, the riding on the horse. So dependent arising is like mirage-like, reflection-like, like a rainbow-like, and the dream-like phenomena. So yeah. So in chapter 9, maybe I read it. The identifying the object of negations, the way the suchness of the dependent origination is expounded. This has 3 sections. How this is presented in the perfect scripture, how the meaning of the scripture is established by reasoning. And number 3 is an enumeration of emptiness and the established conclusions, right? So he's saying that this whole idea of the wisdom, it is not just some intelligent guy came up and he got this idea, right? So this whole, the teachings kind of explicitly or implicitly stated in the Buddha's scriptures, right? And then the meaning of the scripture is established by reasonings. Now the Nagarjunas, Buddha Palitas, the Chandrakirtis, they continuously exercise on those wisdom to establish, to constitute the things do not have the intrinsic natures, right? And then with that, because the conventional reality is there is no limit of the conventional reality. So therefore, and because of the conventional reality of the varieties, so an emptiness of the each phenomena and also enumerates, right? There's many because of the many conventional reality. Right? So how this is presented in the perfect scriptures, now the first has 2 parts, citation showing how it was taught in the scripture, and number 2, the identifying the force opposing the understanding of the suchness. Now, citations show how it was taught in the scriptures. Here in the 10th ground sutra states, the Buddha's scripture, when the Bodhisattvas on the 5th ground enters the 6th ground. So when fifth ground enters the 6th ground, he does so by means of the 10 perfect equanimities with respect to the phenomena. What are these 10? What are these 10? They are, number 1, perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of sign. So that is the one of the emptiness, right? And number 2, the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of identifying characteristics. Tema meba, senior members. Now, so, and then the number 3 is in their absence of birth, Dewa members, in being unborn and being void, in their number 6 is their primordial purities, and number 7 in their freedom of elaborations, number 8 perfect equanimity in their absence of affirmations and rejections. So the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their resemblance to the illusion, to dream, to mirage, to echoes, to reflection of the moon in the water, to mirage, mirror images, and conjurations. So Number 10, the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of duality of real and unreal. So now they're saying, if there is many the varieties in the conventional reality, and the emptiness of each conventional reality also become many. Right? So now this many is not like, many peoples, many vegetables, many tables. So you can see them, all these many are independent, mutually independent. So here is many is because of by naming many, by many fabrications. So emptiness of each fabrications. The convention, the fabrication do not have any intrinsic nature, so therefore their emptiness are many but not substantial, independent.
Like forests in the trees.
Yeah, yeah. So like the emptiness of the nations, emptiness of our forest, emptiness of government, right? So because these whole conventional reality are, they don't really exist by their own essence, right? So the emptiness of them, just by name, it is the many. Just merely by the name, it's many. But these are many, is not like a many table, many peoples. So the first emptiness, perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of signs, means each thing's conventional reality when it appears to the mind. So this is how we give the name, and linguistically we say entity. For example, there's entity of the fire, or when the doctor checks your body and this is your heat is right, entity of the heat is increasing or decreasing. The entity of the moisture or the water is increasing, decreasing, right? So this is how so this entity of the fire in the body, entity of the water in the body, entity of the wind in the body, entity of the space in the body, entity of the space, the consciousness, right? But these entity are the entity because of each thing has identified in a single unit, right? So each thing is identified as a single unit means therefore you are identifying the heat in a single unit, right? So which means you're separating your heat from the water by naming it as the fire entity. So you are separating your moistures from the heat by naming it the water entity. So now, do they really, when you give the name, separate name, do they become separate? Right? Because by name, you say the entity of the water, entity of the fire, entity of the wind. So do they really, become the independent kind of separate phenomena? If that's this is how you think, then you may have, right? You may be able to physically separate your heat from the water, and you can physically separate the water from the heat. So without the heat, there is no moisture in the body. So they elementally, they don't physically separate it. So now separation appears to the mind because your thought is identifying each thing in a single unit. So absence of sign means when you are identifying in a single unit, there's a sign in you, sign of independent things. So As for example, when there is the one braid, and then with eye you identify it as the color of the braid. With tongue consciousness, you identify taste of the braid, and with the kind of with the nose sense power, smell, adore, right? Adore, smell the braid. So now, in the conceptually, you have kind of identified in a single unit in many color, smell, and the taste and the tactilities. So as you have separated in the single unit, if they really braid itself, it become many. So then you have to find which part of the braid that holds the colors, which part of the braid that holds the smell, right? Is it in the middle of the braid, or is it in the bottom of the braid, or the behind the braid? Right? So the braid, there is nothing. They don't really exist. Color in separate, and the smell in separate, and the taste and the tactilities. So the entity means conceptually identified in a single unit, which means, right, things do not exist. Things do not identify by themselves, not physically, not any essence of the things. So it's only identified in the conception. So the entity is conceptually fabricated the phenomena.
So in terms of the mind and identifying, does it identify through negation? So in terms of, a cow is a cow because it's not a horse. Is that correct?
So that's the independent. The cow is independent from the horse. Horse is independent. You can say, this is the cow, not the horse. And you just move the cow inside, and now you bring the horse. Oh, yeah, this is the horse.
Because it's not.
Yeah, you can have the horse without, right? Without the cow. And here, within the braid, you cannot have color of the braid and then leave the smell and tactilities. Right. But conceptually, it seems there are. Like, looks like a cow and a horse. Color is not a smell is not color, and tactility is not smell and color. So here, what I'm trying to explain is the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of sign. Right? Each phenomena, when it appears, there's a sign that they do exist by themselves. So it looks like I'm color, I'm not smell. I'm smell, I'm not the color. So I'm the tactility, I'm the rough one, soft one, right? Heavy one, light ones. So these are the signs. Now in the reality and ultimately or objectively, those signs always false. Is right. So number two, the emptiness is the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of identifying characteristics. So identifying characteristics, which means, when you say what identifies impermanence? What is the characteristic that identifies the impermanence? What is the characteristic that identifying the product? So what is the characteristic that identifying the functional things? So what is the characteristic identifying a seer? What is the characteristic that identifying the smeller? And what is the characteristic identifying the potter? Right. So what is the characteristic identifying, criminals? Right. So all this, it seems that each characteristics is like, what do you call this? Yeah, when the tourist place, there was a guide and who explained to the tour, right? Oh, this is from 19th century, the 18th century. So it seems like each characteristic is tourist guide. They say, yeah, yeah. So here said, this is the smeller, this is the seers. So these characteristics are there because of your projections, not the characteristics identifying themselves.
How is it different from the color of the bread and characteristic? How can it's not the same thing of the characteristic of the bread? It's not the color.
It's a very, very similar, but here the term that we are using is before the sign. Right? The sign means each thing that appears. So it has a sign of the independent. And now, very similar, each characteristics we just pick, right? One characteristic it picks. It like by itself identifying something. Right?
The first one is more independent.
It's the same. The sign means the sign of independent, and the sign of independent, the how independent means sign of the characteristic that by itself identifying something. Right? So there's the independent. So the first, the emptiness, the absence of sign means the sign itself. It is not, in the category of the characteristic or anything, just by name. So the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of defining characteristics. So like active seeing is the defining characteristic that defines the seer. So if the kind of active seeing is the defining characteristic, so that can define the seer exists. So if the active seeing by itself is doing, then we can we have to be able to make we are able to determine that, the first agent haven't exist, and after the agent seer, then he start kind of performing active seeing. Then the color that he has shows, right? So if you try to objectively look, then first the seer has to exist. That seer is the seer, but he hasn't performed active seeing. So there's kind of big contradictions. Every time there's seers, without active seeing, nothing can be seer. There is no seer without having any activity of seeing. Right? So it is very totally mistake that the seer exists first and he has later on performing the act of seeing. But with the language, with this kind of conceptual, they all put in the order. This is what we are seeing. And the very very nature of the act of seeing again is also conceptually projected, right? If there is something, that act of seeing, that is inherent with somewhere. So the first we pick, like for example, if the act of seeing is not there within what you saw, not in the color. And the second, if the act of seeing is not in the color, not in the eye, within the consciousness. And then the consciousness should see things without the sense power. If the sense power by itself has the activity of seeing, the sense power is just like mirror. It's just only it has the function as to receiving the reflections. just receiving the reflections and happen to have a quality of seeing things, then the mirror should see your face, the water should see the moon.
So even seeing is conceptualized.
Yeah, seeing is conceptualized because many things put together and there's something to call seeing. So the seeing as a kind of the separate entity is conceptualized. I think everything that we are out of language, we are kind of presenting some kind of nature of the characteristics without conceptualizations, and there is nothing really comes to exist. So there's nothing if objectively, if you talk about the color, smell, taste, the tactility of the braid, so there's no objectively, they don't really exist by themselves. But you say in the language, we say the 5 sensual objects. We say always kind of, we stretch the fingers, the 5 sensual. So when I say the 5 sensual objects, you think, yes, there are like a finger, separately exist. So each kind of, each object locatable within particular kind of, a place or particular kind of, locations.
Was there a Buddhist school that thought each sense power had its own individual? I thought there was a Buddhist school. Was it a non-Buddhist school that thought, was it independent power for like nose and eyes?
Yeah, you can say the independent power is relatively, you can say, yeah, eye has independent powers. What do you mean by independent power? Oh, it is independent from nose.
Oh,
That you can say, yeah. Then no one should seeking independent. There is no one should celebrate the Independence Day.
oh my God.
So by birth, we are all independent. Yeah, so this is, the perfect equanimity of all phenomena in their absence of sign, the absence of the defining characteristics, in their absence of birth. That also, this is how they conceptualize, we call birth, arisen. And before the arisen, there's the arising. And the arising because of the cause. Right? So this is how we conceptualize. Oh, this is the cause. This cause has a potential to giving rise this type of effect. So by reflecting on the potentials, we say it is the cause. It's in the present. And so from this may come. So then it's the future, right? And this has came as the present. So through this conceptualization, so what we are able to see is present and the future, and right, and then the future that is manifest in the present. So it seems that kind of the future is there with the present time, like arising of this barley sprout exists by itself as a separate from the barley seed. Barley seed is there, and the arising of the sprout is somewhere, in the sky, right? And then, so then arising of the sprout that falls on the ground, and then a reason. So the kind of linguistically, this is how we can see the image that is projected by the language. So then the question is, if there is the arising of the sprout and that exists in and of itself, so the question is, the arising of the sprout, does it has any kind of the sprout, the real sprout? If there is the real sprout, it is the past sprout or the present sprout, or is the sprout is not yet happened? If sprout in the future is not yet happened, there is no sprout. If there is no sprout, why it is coming? So the conceptually we can imagine, objectively, there is no time as the future is by itself. There is no present by itself, because there is no objective duration. So duration has to be constructed by naming a minute, hour, day, month, the years. So without conceptually constructing, there is no duration. So I think this is like objectively or ultimately, being absence of birth. In Tibetan, there's a spelling is the future tense. Sakatakaya the Janibke, Kewa Mebas. Kewa Meba means no ultimate arising, right? No ultimate futures. Right? So when there is no ultimate coming or arising as a future, and from that futures, right, there's nothing has presently born or manifested, arisen. Yeah, I think this is, we have, many times we have exercised in the Nagarjuna's chapter 1, in the particular chapter 20s. So we also sometimes say yogurt from the milk. Right? From the milk, there's a yogurt. So from the milk, there's yogurt. Yogurt from the milk it seems like, for the language, for the conventional, it seems like, oh, this person is coming from that house. He was there, right? So people don't really, and conventionally, they don't really clearly making a distinctions. The yogurt from milk and the person from house. So the person from house, person has to exist in the house, right? If the yogurt too exists within the milk, like person live in the house. So then every effect should exist with their cause. So then male or females, everybody carries their baby. so everyone becomes once pregnant. So every dough has the braid, every food has the waste of the food inside. So every practitioners has their kind of Buddha. Every follower of the God is there. Every follower of the heaven is heaven's inside. Right. So this is like as something you already have, it already being established. And then you look for the heaven, you look for the Buddha. So when you look for the Buddha, you open eyes, you pray, you cry, you look up. But Buddha sits inside. So Buddha says, how stupid you are. I'm inside. You say. So the effect is never really exists. Nature of the effect by nature. So because it is effect, it should not be within the cause. So therefore the yogurt is not in the milk. And yogurt is not in the milk. And the yogurt happened after milk being ceased. Sprout happened after the seed has ceased to exist through the disintegrations, right? And seed is also not transferring to the state of the sprout. Milk is not transferring to the state of the yogurt. So otherwise, the milk permanently exists. And the seed kind of is not permanent. So in this case, in this way says, in absence of being, absence of birth and absence of being unborn. So being unborn means like that. Yogurt is not born. Yogurt is not born, and the milk was not pregnant. Right? So yogurt is not coming from the state of the milk. So this is this thing. So I think there's a lot of kind of logic in Nagarjuna's theory, kind of through reasoning, they refute the intrinsic nature and the born and arising and the conditions. So in there, being void, Majeba, Wembas. Void is the term that in Sutra this is Wemba means so devoid of objectivity. Right? Things do not have any entities that they totally absence of the objectivities. Everything is subjectively subjectively exist. And now the number 6 is their primordial purities. So now the objectivity, absence of objectivity is this happen because of the Buddha's teaching, or when the Nagarjunas explained the kind of dependent originations, now he has destroyed the objectivity before it objectively. It's not like that. It's a primordially. Things do not have any objectivity from the beginning. So the emptiness, intrinsic nature is not created by Buddha. So that nature of absence of intrinsic nature is before the Buddha, during the Buddha, after the Buddha. So then the perfect equanimity in their absence of affirmations and rejections. So here we say Langjat project, affirmations and rejections. We say, oh, anger is not good, attachment is not good, jealousy is not good, oh, compassion is good, right? So almost like you are in the supermarket, you just select oh, this is good for blood, this is good for brain. So, like, there is no things objectively as a kind of, need to be abandoned. There is no any objectivities to be kind of, need to be adapted or to kind of, so yeah, so that there's no independent affirmation and rejections. Number 9, the perfect equanimity to all phenomena in their resemblance to illusions, to dream, to mirage, to echoes, reflection of the moon in the water, and the mirage, the mirror image, and conjurations. And so now, this illusions. Illusions is we call Duma. Right? So I think here one of the example of the illusions is in the evening. Yeah. So people in the evening in the corner of your house, your room, and when there is the coil rope, and you project with your eye, you're projecting it. Oh, maybe this is the snake, right? But it's seemingly because of the color and it's the shape, right? How they coiled up. So, and that kind of, there is some kind of, degree for kind of, for the projection of the snake. So that when the things appears to the mind, everything seems like they are independent. So this is like illusion-like phenomena. Things are like illusions, and the 2 dreams. And then the question is, everything's you say the 5 sensor object, 5 elements, and then a nations, kind of a garden, a forest. So everything there, whatever you say, right? They don't have any intrinsic natures, but it functions, right? It functions like a dream elephant. So when you dream yourself chased by someone, the enemies, right? And there is the real fear, and there is kind of kind of obvious that you are seeing, right, the someone who is coming after you. So there is the functions, the proper functions are all functioning with kind of with projections, right, within the projections. So everything that you in the second existence and your whole life, you are kind of continuously experience the happiness, joy, the excitement, and in what do you see, right? Things are happening, the real happening. So within the projections, there is something to be feared, something to be excited, and something to be peaceful, right? So yes, it's functioning, but all kind of the unreal, but functioning like a dream. And then to mirage, to echo. So mirage means, from the distance, you see there's some movement, and you may think, oh, there's a water. So the mirage is this kind of the phenomena when you go closer, right? More you closer, and it will shy away, it will disappear. So the phenomena is like mirage-like things, and you pay attention. So if you bring your mind closer to it, and there is no solidity. So, and to echoes, right? This is like, when you make the sound, and then from the wall or the mountains, they can echo back to you. So there is no one calling you, but you can hear. And because you have kind of, you make that sound, and that reflect right, back to you. So it's similar. Everything that you see is wonderful, not good, or it's scary, right? Whatever you say, because without your kind of response of the projecting, so if you don't do anything, it's nothing coming to you. So you kind of agree, and I'm going to create this way. So that's why things seems to be more exciting, more more fearful, more kind of attractive. This is like that. So you make the sound, you project things, and things happen. So you make the call, right? So things are, there's nothing independently. There's nothing independently too harmful, too beneficial. Right? So reflection on the moon and the waters, and to mirror image. So water, reflection of the moon in the water, and the mirror image. So yes, there is something to see, right? There's some kind of benefit from seeing the reflections, but you cannot hate the reflections. You cannot too much fixate on the reflections, because the reflections do not exist by their own essence, right? So you cannot, this reflection is very, I appears very beautiful, so I want to hold this, keep it, and show it to my friend. So right, there is nothing, because the reflections do not exist within their by their own essence. So every phenomenon that appears within the mind is like a reflection of the moon in the water, the mirror image. And to conjurations, now conjure means, right? Like it. So the magician is yourself. So you create things and you get excited. So normally the magicians who study, who gain the knowledge how to play the trick, so they don't get confused, right? So only to get confusion for the audience, and the audience can be excited in that. So here, ourselves, we create things and we confuse with our own creations, right? So things like the things that are really existing before the mind is like whole kind of magician play. So then, perfect equilibrium of all phenomena in their absence of duality of real and unreal. And here the real and unreal in Tibetan, this is mobile the mobile mevas. So mobile the mobile mevas. For example, like we say space and obstructive phenomena. So it seems there's a two thing. Space there is the absence of obstructive phenomena. And obstructive phenomena is the physical form. Right? So because you have give the name, the space is by itself, and the space by itself is independent from the obstructive phenomena. And obstructive phenomena by itself independent from the space. So when we analyze, when you try to close look within the nature of the space, right? There is no space at all you can define without relying on the obstructive phenomena. Because space defines through the absence of obstructive phenomena, right? And you can also talk about the space, my space, and your space, small space, the big space, is all relying on obstructive phenomena without measuring, without depending on measuring and the physical things, obstructive phenomena. There is no small space, big space. So the ngobu mevas. Another word, samsara and nirvana, right? Samsara and nirvana. Like samsara, by name, it looks like they are independent. So samsara and nirvana is, like the milk and the yogurt, right? So they are not two independent phenomena. So if the independent, so the yogurt should exist different from the milk, right? And milk should be perceived directly and having been independent from the yogurt. So there is no direct perceptions that could witness. So they are independent. And the samsara and nirvana is also like that. Right? So the samsara means the kind of, the consciousness, which is kind of a trap and their own projections. And nirvana is that very consciousness now and get the freedom from the mental projections. So this same consciousness. So when it's stuck in their own creation, it's samsara, and then they've got freedom from that, it's nirvana. It's like milk and yogurt and seed and sprout. And then meva means, disintegrations of the seed. Is a disintegration of the seed. And that person, so we interpret that something that, or dead, or past, or destroyed, or seized. So they are, normally people interpret it become things turning into nothing. Right? When things cease to exist through the disintegrations, and people always think now it's going to be kind of become nothing. So no such thing that is ending up become nothing, because things changes. Things do not turn into nothing. And then the cessations, or the name of cessation, or disintegration, death, or kind of, so whatever you name, things never turn into nothing. So the death is the kind of, the very moment of the death of the person is the birth of another person. So the death is not the nothing. Right? So when the doctor says no more, he is more. Right? So another more to come again. I'm sorry, he's no more. No, he's more. You cannot stop him. So when he realized the nature of all phenomena in such term, that because of his sharp and opposite forbearance, he will attain the sixth ground, namely the manifest. Now, this is how saying fifth ground, how the interest in the sixth ground. Therefore, how the fifth ground Bodhisattvas become sixth ground. So do they go to college and take the test or get the certificate? So he said, this how they kind of exercise, the train in the mind to understand, right? That things are like a mirage-like phenomena, reflection-like phenomena. They are like a dream-like phenomena. So which means they don't, now they start to seeing that everything is just, relatively exist, but nothing independent. Right? So things like echoes. So in this wisdom will lead the fifth ground to the sixth ground. Yeah, so maybe we do some question and answers. Any questions?
I don't know if this is exactly a question. You were saying, you were talking a moment ago about how things change form just because they're in some kind of process of decay doesn't mean they become nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean that they become even more obviously, I would say, at least how it appears, identityless. If we take a piece of wood and burn it, or a piece of steel and it rusts, or we boil water, it becomes a gas, or we break down atoms and they become molecules, they become totally new molecules, or recombine in different ways. I don't know, in a way, it sounds like it could be comforting emotionally that things, though they die, they don't become nothing. But it's just, it's like, almost like they pass into an even more obvious illusory state. We have this conventional reality, and but when things decay, they're no longer in the form it would seem eventually that we can relate to. There's not something with an identity that is maintaining its identity. There's something within a conventional sense, having an identity, but it kind of totally becomes identity-less. I mean, except it's more easy to say water boiled becomes a gas, but it's more ineffable that a conventional self, that is, it has an identity on a conventional level, becomes a new self. We have no idea really what it becomes. There's nothing obvious we can say about it.
Yeah. So decay, dead, disintegrated. So does not mean things turning into nothing. But at the same time, what has decayed, what has ceased to exist, won't coming back. That's for sure. What has came is not there in the prior, kind of within the cause. So the if hypothetically, if things that has came is the one that has decay or one that has ceased, so then so things become the permanent. So they don't really change. This is like an actor who's changing their kind of costumes. Right? So things are not, the seed is not acting, turning into sprout. Right? So when you, right? So seed, through the process of the kind of, with the with the soil and the wind and the water and all together, that is disintegrating, helping to disintegrate the seed. When the soil, water, sun is disintegrating the seed, so people call it now, right, is a processing. So by having disintegrate the seed, and there is this sprout. This sprout only it manifests when preceded by the particular seed. Without preceding any seed, no sprout happen. So we think, yes, this sprout is the continuity of that seed. So that also changed the meaning of the continuity. Continuity does not mean constantly happening one single entity. So one sees, another happen. Disintegration arising, disintegration arising. So I think this is kind of, this you can apply to the everything. Everything means now every conditional things. In the sutra, the Buddha says, "Kema dujena meta, keshin jibe chujin is." Teta keshin jibe chujin is. Teta nyewa shiva de. So Buddha says, "Kema dujena meta" means Buddha says, oh, every conditional phenomena, any composite phenomena are impermanent. So there are everything, every conditional phenomena are impermanence. There are nature of changing. And two, within the change, the change that is caused by a change that happening within the ignorance and the afflictive emotions and the karma, and that is called samsara. So if you want to stop that changing, the continuum, so by kind of so you destroy the ignorance and the karma. So then it will stop. What it will kind of the process that continuing in certain directions. So, for example, if you have in your yard, in your yard. So if you find, like what called avocado trees, you find, right? So you say, oh, that's good. So I have avocado tree. If the avocado trees grows under your house, it's not really good. so, so it may destroy the foundation of the house, right? So this is like right now. If now the problem here is what we call it samsara, second existing, truth of suffering. So this because this has kind of a train and go to the particular directions. So they always think the changes that are driven by the confusions and the afflictions. That's why we are not comfortable. So now, because you want simply no, kind of peace, no suffering. So then says to change the directions. Don't go in this way. Right? So the driven cause for the second existing is ignorance and afflictions. So if you destroy kind of the afflictive emotion and misconceptions, then mind go find another directions. Right. So we need to update, reprogram. so that's it. Otherwise, the old downloads keep coming in. So everything is impermanent. Everything's by nature they changes, and so to stop this particular changes, right? Having been stopped is the peace. I know that people find kind of difficult to accepting, continuing, and kind of disintegrating. So we have, if things continue, things shouldn't be disintegrate. If things disintegrated, and why is it to continue? So the continue here is not because of the permanent. Continues because of the impermanent. Impermanence because of the disintegrate, past disintegrate, and futures arising. Something past, something coming. The past and the futures, there is change. That's within that change, you have to find the continuity. So if you interpret continuity as one single entity constantly remaining, that is not the continuity, that is the permanent. So if we remain, because we are continuously existing, if we remain, right, existing or constantly existing as what we are, so that means we have a lot of problems. So, so we want to see many changes in our life. Oh, we need a little bit nose no longer. So, I don't want to go to next life with bald head. so you cannot bring the makeup to the next life, right? So, and I don't want the wrinkle for next life. So because things has to things has to disintegrate. Whatever right now, it will always disintegrate. It means and going to be ceased. And that cessation is not the stopping of the continuity. So I think maybe people have a little bit difficulty accepting it, but this is the reality. If there is one thing, one single entity constantly remaining existing, and with that base, you are kind of, you're trying to kind of get the benefit, right? So you're trying to overcome the suffering. So something that is never changed, remain not just 24/7, it is permanently, whole life, many lives, many centuries, unchangeably existing. So how can you make hope for that to bring the change? So by itself never change, and by asking someone or by doing something can change that? No. So they're very unrealistic. But yeah, sometimes with that kind of view, people kind of find the spiritual path. So sometimes it's helpful, hopeful. Sometimes, many times, you doubt, right? Yeah. Sometimes the spiritual paths, like sometimes you're trying to, the tourist who is without any plan, without any kind of goal to where to go, they just travel because you want happy. So the many times they find suffering. So maybe they complain, hotel, they complain, the financials, they complain something else, but they don't really see how the suffering is coming. Yeah, any other questions? No question?
Can you talk about the absence of duality of the real and the unreal?
That's as I said. Yeah. I use the most kind of obvious example, space and obstructive. So it's just conceptually we're identifying space, right, independent from this obstructive phenomenon. Obstructive phenomena say, oh, there's obstructive, there's no space. This is how we say it. But because of that, making this kind of the identifying it separately, and we think the space is independent from obstructive. The obstructive phenomena is independent from the space, and then when we say kind of seeking for the liberation or enlightenment, may I be enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings, which means if you see your future enlightened being is totally independent from yourself, that is the wrong. Right now in the samsara, in the second existing, is not independent. Independent and different from your kind of your ultimate goal. Like yogurt is no independent, different from the milk. Sprout is no independent from the seed. So which means we are trying to find the changes that continuously bring the peace. So which means you have to like your change. Right? If you don't like your change and you hope something, that anything that comes in the future is due to the impermanence. So sometimes people don't want to change themselves, but they want kind of, new things. So that is kind of a total contradiction. Yeah, okay. Chanju semjo rinpoche, maje bana, gejuji, geba nyamba, meba nyamba, kone kodo pewish. Tonye tawa rinpoche, maje bana, gejuji, geba nyamba, meba nyamba, kone kodo pewish. Pama simjen tamjen, dedan denjuji, nyenro tamje, tado towa, chanju sempa, kana suju, teta kunje monom drupjiruji, kare rabe gobe shima, pendan dewa malun juwe ne. May the
precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May the born of the multiplying but increase forevermore. May the precious mind realizing emptiness not yet born arise and grow. May the born of multiplying but increase forevermore. Due to all these merits, may all other but sentient beings have all the happiness. And may all lower realms be empty forever. Wherever there are Bodhisattvas, may all their prayers be accomplished immediately. In the sacred paths of all these personal realms, you are the source of all that and happiness, more powerful changes. Amen.
Thank you very much.